Alright, so this review is coming in a bit late. It's taken me a bit more than a month. In fact, I should really put a caveat from now on that the reviews will come in whenever I get done with a book. I'm a bit of a slow reader and I've had a lot going on. In fact, my own book, Two Gun Heart, which was about Al Capone's long-lost brother who was a prohibition officer, just came out last month. Been busy promoting that, finishing that, etc., etc. So the next books will come when they can. In the meantime, I finished this called Mobsters, Gangs, Crooks, and Other Creeps by Joe Bruno. And essentially, it's like short stories of, as it says, Mobsters, Gangs, Crooks, and Other Creeps. Essentially, there'll be like a short story about one mobster, then a short story about, as he says, a creep. It's hard to sort of say, give him any other word. Another short story about a crook, etc., etc. One of the stories in there was about Al Capone, and it was sort of his gangland life in the form of a short story. And of course, since I've been doing so much research in that regard, I knew what he was talking about. I was able to kind of check his accuracy, and that particular part was accurate, and in fact the rest of it seemed to be accurate as far as I can tell. He sourced a lot of his material at the end, and it's an interesting issue to talk about because a lot of times people they have difficulty trusting when it's a self-published book, and there's almost this sense of, well, if it was traditionally published, it must have been checked by editors, and looked over, etc., etc. And I'm coming to you telling you that's not necessarily true. I've worked with traditional publishers, and primarily their motivation is to make money. And so if they see something that, well, it's questionable as to whether that's a fact, but it'll make money, put that in. If there's something that is definitely accurate but isn't likely to, it isn't very politically correct, or they don't particularly like it, or their ego is in the way and they're just like, oh, well, we don't want it, or worse of all, it won't make as much money, they'll have a tendency of taking that out. So it's not as though they're necessarily completely accurate either. It really comes down to, you have to question, what is the motivation of this author, what is the motivation of who's publishing this. If it's self-published, you're actually kind of ahead of the curve, because this is a person who felt so strongly about this subject that they were willing to spend a lot of their time, take a big risk, and usually not make very much money to give you this information. And then you can research the person and how much credibility do they have, what are the other things they've written, etc., etc. When it's a traditionally published thing, yes, you have editors, but remember, their motivation is to make money, so take it for what it's worth. In this case, one of the things that gave it some credibility is the same thing as kind of a little bit of a criticism on this particular book. He uses a lot of slang as he writes, Joe Bruno, the author. There are a lot of times, as you can even say in the title, Mobsters, Gangs, Crooks, and Other Creeps, a lot of times he doesn't use as much professional author language, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of times where he uses kind of almost gangster slang, which gives you feeling that maybe he was involved in that world somehow. I don't know. I don't have any idea of his past, but it's just the way he writes sounds very much like that, which gives him some credibility, but at the same time also is somewhat distracting in terms of the writing style, etc. But that being said, it's a lot of interesting stories. I lived in New York for a while. This is Volume 1, New York City, so I get the idea he has volumes on different cities, that sort of thing. And one thing I always discovered about New York was that there was very much of a sense of, well, we've had this perfect city with all these perfect things, and I know that there were some things that were not things to not be completely proud of, and this book shows that underworld and shows some of those things, particularly a lot of the racism which happened, which that was one of the funny things when I was there. A lot of the locals loved to criticize the South and other places where there's all this racism, and this book really shows how there's probably more racism there than there's ever been anywhere else. It's not a slam on New York or anything like that, but it shows this other side that the tourist books are not going to show you. So take a look for this book. It's on Amazon. I don't know what other readers it's on, but I know it's at least on the Kindle. I think there's even a paperback. I'm not quite certain, but take a look for that. And overall, I recommend it. It's just sometimes the language gets a little bit slangy if that's a word. I'm going to make that a word right now. Slangy. So now I need to figure out what book I'm going to review next. It's not going to be nonfiction, since I finished my own nonfiction book. Now I want to get into the mood of something else. It's going to be Relic Worlds is my next book, which is science fiction. So I want to get something science fiction-y, fantasy-ish, something that's, you know, creative. What's that? Some kind of music playing. Well, it might have something to do with the book that I chose. I didn't get any suggestions, so I chose this one called The Ables by Jeremy Scott. Now, he runs another channel, which is absolutely great. I'm going to put a box somewhere here of it that will link to his channel. He does this thing called CinemaSins, and one of the best shows is this thing called Everything Wrong With. And he talks about everything wrong with these various movies, which I love because I worked in the film industry for 20 years. And these movies deserve it. These filmmakers usually deserve it with their gigantic egos. And he's spot on. He notices very interesting details, that sort of thing. So if somebody can notice that many details in movies, he's probably going to do a really good job with this book. However, since he you know, always finds the sins and the problems in all these other movies, it leads me to I'm just going to have to do that same thing with the book. So I will find every little detail. I doubt I'll be quite as observant as him, but let's hope for the best. And I will have to start the sin counter. Let's begin it right now. Or maybe here. I don't know where I put the little ding. And there's my cat. So I will see you next time, whenever that is. Oh, I'll have to check my weight here. Just a second, cat. What's my weight? She's sniffing out my weight, gonna try to figure it out. Alright, cat, okay, before she eats my hair, I better go and check my weight here. Alright, that's the scale. I don't remember what it was last time. I'll have to look back at the video. Ooh, 211 pounds. I thought it was gonna be 2,114. Can't remember if that's more or less than last time. Those of you looking at these videos will be able to tell. But I'll be walking as I read Jeremy Scott's book, The Ables. In the meantime, take a look at it yourself. Maybe we can have a discussion on it. I'm not sure when I'll be done and when it'll be when I'll have the next review, but hopefully it'll be, you know, just over a month or so. Anyway, with that in mind, keep on reading independent books.